We're in a 2-week series, last week and this week, through a series going through this idea of the fact that we are sojourners. It's this idea that we have been displaced by God's goodness for a purpose and a reason. And this idea of sojourner is a simple idea that whatever you call home, God throughout the history, through Adam and Eve to Abraham to Jacob, to the Israelites, all of God's people have this tendency to leave home, whether it's by choice or they're forced to. And for many of us here, we're not necessarily ethnically Korean, or you didn't grow up in Korea. And for others of you who are ethnically Korean, you found yourself at an English-speaking church, which was not a part of the plan. And in this way, we find ourselves displaced often in life. And the hope of this series is that you would see on a greater level that God is still in control, that He has a plan for you, but He has a plan through you. And last week we talked about the idea that God has a plan in you. He's doing something in you. And this week, to help you see that however long you are in Korea, or maybe you'll be leaving Korea soon and you'll be going to some other place, to help you see that God is still in control and He has a plan for you and through you in that place. Yesterday, I was at the Seoul Global Center. It's this government-provided organization that helps expats in Korea adjust to Korea. I went there to take my Korean placement exam because I decided it's about time that I really learn Korean well enough to have meaningful conversations with Koreans, especially with other pastors who are interested in our church. Often, even just a couple of weeks ago, I was with some church members, and this man comes up to me and says, "Oh, you're Pastor Joel." I'm like, "How do you know me?" You know, and they know me from my days at Oniri, through doing CGN TV and all these things. And so as we talk, I just can't really have a conversation. He'll ask, how's church? It's like, "Oh, it's good." It's like, "Oh, how's this and that? And why did you plant a church? Why in Ito? And isn't it so transient?" I'm like, "Yes." And I realized I can't do this. But as I was in that line to take this placement exam, there are probably about 100 people, 150 people in that line. And all of us are foreigners. All of us can't speak Korean. And it was this weird energy of people who, you could just tell they didn't feel comfortable. Because the people who were moderating the exam, the people who were welcoming us in, they were Korean teachers, and so they were speaking Korean to us. And so people are wondering, why aren't they speaking English to us? Don't they know that we can't speak Korean? And there's this weird energy there. But at the same time, you could tell that the people there in this line felt comfortable to know that they weren't the only ones who have felt out of place here in Korea. There was this weird energy, there was this curiosity, but others were jaded too. As we were taking the exam, there's these two guys in the back just making jokes about Korea and Korean culture throughout, even during the exam. And in my mind, I feel like this is a good representation of Korea, where there's people of all different experiences, with all different thoughts and all these different emotions. And for you, I'm not sure what your experience has been like. Maybe this is your first week, maybe this is 15 years. But chances are, wherever you are in that walk, you don't fully feel comfortable. You don't fully feel like Korea is your home. But others of you feel like not only is Korea not my home, but when you go back home, you realize that's not your home either. So what do you do with that? There is a reason in which I believe God displaces us in His goodness. If you can open up your Bibles to 1 Peter 2. This is written by Apostle Peter, the one who denies Jesus 3 times. It's written by that man who's been brought back, restored into this faith community. And he writes to those who are exiled. These are Christians, believers who are displaced by, for whatever reason, persecution and different trials and hardships. And it's Peter writing to these believers scattered, displaced, sojourning through these foreign lands. And this is the word that he has for us. And the main idea is this. The main idea is that we are all sojourners. Whether we're Korean living in Korea or we're foreigners living in Korea, spiritually, we're sojourners. Spiritually, we don't belong in this world, and we know that. And that's what last week was about. But even further than that, for us, I think we experience it on a double level, a deeper level. That you'll experience this spiritually, but you also experience this socially and culturally. And you'll start to realize these lessons and these difficulties that you go through in life actually reveal a deeper spiritual lesson for you. And that's the hope, for us to be able to really understand what God wants for us while we are in Korea. So let's read 1 Peter 2, verse 9. 1 Peter 2, verse 9 is where we are at. If you don't have Bibles, we have Bibles in the middle, in the back. If you don't have a Bible, that's our gift to you. We do believe this is God's Word. So please do read along with me as we read 1 Peter 2, verse 9. It says, "But you are a chosen race." He's being very purposeful with these words. As these people are sojourning, it's a reminder, you are a chosen race. Though you feel displaced, though you feel like you have no home, you have no citizenship in any nation, the words that are spoken, written to these sojourners is, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Peter goes outright and tells them what they need to know most importantly. As they feel displaced, as they struggle through, where is my home? For them to be reminded, you don't have home here. Whether you're displaced or you actually live in your home country, you don't have a home here. Your home is not Korea. Your home is not home. But your home is in heaven. You're passing through. And that's the message that he wants his people to know, that you have a new identity. You are a new people. You are a new race. You're a whole new nation. And to ascribe to a completely different set of values. So that's what he's speaking of first and foremost, that you have a spiritual home in heaven. That's where you should long for. But as he does it, then he actually urges his people in verse 11. "Beloved, I urge you, as sojourners and exiles, to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable." So now he's telling them how to live. He tells them your identity, and then now he tells them how to live. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when you speak, when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. When you start to see these words, you start to understand why Peter is saying these things. Because once you're displaced, they want to find a home, but then his challenge is, as sojourners, affirming this identity that you are displaced, as sojourners, as exiles, to abstain from the passions of the flesh. Because the tendency will be, as you long for home, as you find these longings for comfort, for familiarity, you'll start to see these desires come out that are ungodly, that struggles maybe that you haven't had since a long time ago. And you start to see these passions come up. So he tells them, watch out for these passions because it wages war against your soul. And those are strong words. It's this idea that Christian life is warfare. It's not you just simply choose God, you find him to be the way, you find him to be the light, and then after that, it's easy. Oh, God is my everything. And everything is easy to follow him. The wording is, it's spiritual warfare. You actually start to agonize. You start to struggle. You start to realize there's these desires that you have to live for God, but then you see these other desires that are waging war against you, right? That's the language that he uses. And just to comfort those of you who may be struggling, maybe you came to Korea recently, you find yourself trying to find comfort and longing in these places, and you feel like you've been failing. You feel like you've been struggling and just in sin. To let you know, that's not uncommon. to let you know that those struggles are like warfare, and to comfort you there. But from there, he then challenges you in verse 12, right? To keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable. And then he continues on. He continues on in verse 13. And this is where we're going to start taking some notes down so that we can be mindful of what is going on. The outline is also provided in the sermon portion of the app. And it says this, be subject to the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme, or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you shall put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone. Love the brotherhood. Fear God, and honor the emperor. I find it fascinating. That as he tells these sojourners, these people who are displaced, he tells them, this is your home is in heaven. And he challenges them with generalities of how you should live honorably amongst these people. They'll be different than you. You won't fully understand why they do things the way that they do. But he says, but to live honorably. But then the first particular that he speaks of is to live honorably within the government. And if I was Peter, I probably wouldn't have said that. Government would not be in my mind. You know what I mean? I think it's strange that the first specific instruction that he has for what it means to live honorably, to have this kind of good conduct, is to actually honor the government. Is that strange? I think it's strange. So I thought about this idea of why does Peter tell these sojourners, these people who don't find citizenship in that nation, to say, well, the first thing that you should be thinking about is the government. What's the role of the government? The role of the government is to provide a safe place. It's to provide protection for the weak, right? It's a place to promote peace, to establish a flourishing society. That's what a good government should do. Romans 13 talks about how God actually places people in government for that role. And the first lesson that we'll take away from this is then to honor the land. Right? As you live in Korea, or if you're about to move somewhere else, to honor the land, to honor the laws of the land, to honor the people of the land, to honor the culture of the land. That's what he is saying. Because the temptation is this. We're so heavenly minded that we're of no earthly good. But we're so set towards heaven. We think about all these spiritual things that you're not actually present here in this world. And what Peter is doing, he's saying, your home is in heaven, yes, but be present. Be present here. Be present for the struggles of the people that are going, the struggles that those who are near you are going through. He's saying, be present for them. Be heavenly minded, yes, but be earthly, a blessing to those who are near you. And as the idea of government is put out there, then the idea is this: don't be a distraction, don't be a hindrance, but be a blessing to the nation that you are in such a way that you love them and you honor them. You honor their values, you honor their culture, you honor their laws. Obviously, unless it goes against God's ways, then obviously you have to be different because you are a citizen of God's kingdom. But in all those other ways, to live honorably. I want to zone in on this verse in verse 17. It says, honor everyone, and then it says, honor the emperor. And a few verses before it says, live honorably. This idea of honor is what Peter is thinking through as he's talking to these sojourners who are living in a foreign country. And I thought about why. Why doesn't he say love? Right? The greatest commandment is to love God, to love others. Why does he say to honor? if you've lived in a foreign country long enough, or if you've done life with people who are of different cultures, you start to realize very quickly it's hard to love because you don't understand. You don't understand the ways in which they do things. And it's in this idea that you start to realize it's impossible to love people different than you if you don't honor them first. If you don't honor other people from other cultures first, it is almost impossible to love them because the things that they say, the things that they do, you don't fully understand. You try to make sense of it, but maybe even within your own heart, it doesn't resonate with you. And it's in that mindset, I think Peter is saying, live honorably, but honor everyone. Don't just love them, honor them. If you can't honor them, you won't be able to love them. The fundamental reason I think racism exists is not because we don't love everybody. I think it's because we don't respect others. Isn't that the fundamental reason racism exists? They look down on people who are different. Just because they're different, just because people don't understand, they look down because they don't get it. And it's in this idea, Peter is saying, even if you don't understand, honor them. Honor the people, honor the culture, honor the land, honor everyone, honor even the king, the governor, the president, even if you don't understand. And this is written in a time where potentially Nero was the emperor, a man who was evil. And so Peter knows full well how challenging it is for the sojourner, for the foreigner, to be able to do this. But we can point our fingers, at the TV or to others and say, this is why racism exists, right? But I think if we're honest with ourselves, we find this happening all the time, right? All the time. If you're not of Korean descent, probably even more. If you're of Korean descent but you lived in a different country and you live in Korea, maybe a little bit less. But you start to feel a friction, don't you? Even if you're Korean coming to this church, I'm sure there has been times where someone has said something, done something, you don't fully get it. And it's this sense where we are called to honor each other. Not just to tolerate, but to actually embrace people of other cultures. It's powerful, I think, what Peter is saying to his people. The first step to love them is actually to honor them. If you could honor them well, that's when you can start to actually give yourself a chance to know them. Because this is what's going to happen. You go to work. They communicate something. And you don't fully understand what was communicated. But everyone else does. And you start to feel the sense that I don't get it. I don't get why they can't be maybe more direct, is maybe how an expat would feel. You start to feel the sense of, how come personal space is different in Korea? And the challenge is when your home culture and Korean culture or any foreign culture, not only it's different, but sometimes it's actually offensive to a certain degree. So for example, personal space for some people. It's this idea that we have our space, but once someone comes into our space, the immediate thought is, give me my space, I want my space. And if we can't honor differences, the first thought that we will always have is criticism, having a critical spirit, as is of judgment. But when you can flip that around, and you can see Korea for the beauties that it has, or any foreign country for the beauties that it has in its culture, what you will start to do is you will learn from it, right? So much so that they call it reverse cultural shock. Not just culturally in terms of space. When you go back to the U.S. or wherever, you'll be like, whoa, look at this Costco. It is ginormous, right? Look at this parking lot. You can see, you can't even see the end of it because it's so big. It's just, there's a sense of cultural shock physically, but also you start to feel it because what you've become is maybe a little bit more Korean in a lot of good ways. Right? I think there's a lot of good things that we can learn from Korea, like the culture of honor. Right? To really be able to honor your elders. I think that's a great thing. I think it's actually a very biblical thing. To be able to have a community-based mindset. It's not all about me. Right? But when you start to see how community-oriented Korean people are, you start to see how beautiful that can be. As opposed to only thinking about myself and my identity and my goals, being so independent. You can learn from Korean culture. I think that's one way to honor them. Another way to honor, I think, Korea while you're here is to invest in this country. You know, in college, there's that one guy who comes over to your apartment and eats your food day in and day out. It's that one guy who calls you for a ride. It's that one guy who asks for the notes at school. And you feel like he's a mooch, right? What's the idea of being a mooch? It's someone who won't give back. He just takes and takes and takes and takes and takes. I think if we as foreigners are not careful about that, we'll just come to Korea and take and take and take, right? We come to Korea, for a lot of us, to save money, to pay back our college tuition. So you're just thinking about money. I came here to Korea to save money to pay back those loans, which is a good thing. But the mentality can be, I'm only here just for that. I'm only here just to take, right? That you don't want to be that mooch. You don't want to be that guy who comes to Korea who only takes and takes and takes. So invest. If you're a teacher, teach well, right? Wouldn't you want your children to learn good education, good English from a foreigner? So in that way, not just obviously just to work and just to get that paycheck and do a haphazard job. The idea is, no, invest. Care for the children. Pray for them. Don't be a mooch, but to invest, right? Treat them how they want to be treated is an important thing, right? It's different. I know it's difficult. I know I look Korean, but my heart is fully American. And so even with my parents, there's a huge cultural gap where, I think for me, if anything, I should have more bitterness to still resolve within my heart. But it's this idea that when I started working at this other church, everyone, when the senior pastor comes in, everyone bows. And it's like a full, but not just, it's a full bow. And in my mind, I just didn't like that because I felt like, well, shouldn't he be the one that also humbles him? So isn't that more biblical when the lead, I have all these biblical thoughts in my mind. And I realized so much of the reason I don't want to do this is simply my pride. Treat people how you want to be treated. What I want from a Korean person or anyone other is not to treat me so formally, because I want to be treated comfortably like a friend. And in that same mindset, what I need to understand, I need to humble myself and understand what it is that the thing it is that they want, to treat them how they want to be treated. And I would say lastly, one way to honor Korea is to enjoy Korea. Right? Enjoy Korea. Enjoy the heated floors. And talk good about it, right? To others. There are good things here in Korea. When you go back maybe home to the US or wherever it would be, you'll go to a restaurant and you'll want to yell across the room, 저기요, right? So that the waiter or waitress will come forth. But in the US, you can't do that. It's rude. Enjoy that. Enjoy the culture in Korea. Enjoy the table button, right? Ding dong. And they come. Enjoy it. Tell others the goodness of Korea, because I do think so often we get so critical. What people hear from us who live in Korea are all the negative things. And I think there's so many good things to share about Korea, the culture of Korea, the honoring culture of Korea, the full body scrubs at Jimjilbang's, right? Enjoy those things. And tell people how much you love Korea. And I think in that way you honor the people, you honor the land. You have to humble yourself to honor the land. But then he says this, not just to honor the government and what the government's trying to do and creating welfare for its society, but then it talks about this idea of love the brotherhood. I think this verse is fascinating. In verse 17 he says this, honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. I think there are 4 pretty random statements, right? Honor everyone. Okay, I get that now, right? I get this idea that we have to honor others first so that we can love them, especially people of other cultures. Honor them. But it says love the brotherhood. That specifically means love the church. Love the fellowship of believers. Love them, right? Honor everyone, love them, and then fear God. Why didn't it say love God? He says fear God. And then after that it says honor the emperor. What's going on? Well, it's poetry in one sense. It's honor is the first statement, honor is the last statement. And these are things of this world. There are things that are earthly. Honor everyone, those who aren't believers, but also honor the king, honor the government, right? And sandwiched in between this is love the brotherhood, love the church, and then after that, it's fear God. It's honor the world, the earth, in one sense, and then sandwiched in between is it's emphasis. It's in the center to love the church and then fear God. What Peter is doing is helping us understand our priorities. He's contrasting this idea of, in one sense, we love our neighbors by honoring them. But with the church, it's not just honoring them. You lay down everything for your brother or sister. Because it's through this demonstration of love and unity, the world knows what that love is. And then in that deeper sense, not only do you honor God, you fear him. For he is God. He is the one true king. He is the one true judge. And I think it's fascinating because he talks about government, this idea of honoring people. And he feels this need to tell them, oh, by the way, love the church. By the way, fear God. Because the last thing that he'll actually address in this letter is actually to love the church. It's calling elders and leaders, but also believers, to love the church. So it's a last message that he gives in this letter, 1 Peter. But in the midst of talking about submitting and honoring this nation, he's saying, but love the church. This is where you'll find home. This is the place where you will come and be comforted. This is the place where when you are broken, someone else will give. Someone else will hug you, love you, pray for you. Love the church. Honor the people, honor the land, but love the church, which is our second point. Why? It is the local church that is the hope of the world. It's the local church that's the hope of the world. Bill Hybels said it, coined it. It's taken to many nations since. It's this simple idea that when you come to church, it's not the lights, right? We don't have lights. It's not the lights. It's not the stage, which we don't have either, right? It's not the money, which we don't have either. It's not the performance value of it. That's not why you go to church. It's not necessarily bad things, but why do you go to church? It's not even for community, because you can find pretty decent community in other places. Sometimes doing community better than the church. Why is it? Peter says, love the church. Because the local church, as they preach God's word, as they encourage each other to see God and his goodness, his grace, his love, his forgiveness, it's that message that changes a heart. I've shared this story before, but I want to share it again. When Bill Hybels was a young pastor, he was in Puerto Rico, in the airport, waiting to fly out back to the U.S. As he is sitting, Bill Hybels, in this airport, he sees two kids, a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, starting to argue. And then that argument quickly escalates to a physical brawl. And this 9-year-old takes a swing and knocks this kid out and just starts beating on him in the airport, and there's blood. So Bill Hybels just quickly stands up and tries to break them apart, but then he hears his name being called on an intercom that he has to get on his flight. So he sees other people coming towards, knowing that that kid will be okay. So he goes onto the airport, and he shares about how this image has haunted him since. But on that airplane ride back to the U.S., he started thinking about this 9-year-old. This kid who, for whatever reason, was so hostile to the 7-year-old that not only did it lead to an argument, but it led him to physically hit him and hurting the other kid. And he felt, as he was thinking about this kid, he felt the Lord basically saying, what's the hope for this kid? What's going to happen to this kid 5 years later, 10 years later? So he thought about it. What's going to change him? Will the government put some sort of structure around their nation so that this kid is loved and taken care of? I mean, probably not. I mean, maybe they'll give him, maybe able to provide for him if he's poor and things like that. But chances are not to touch him in such a way that his life will change. Will he get a job in such a way where he'll change how he thinks about life? Maybe the hatred that he has in his life, will it be a job that changes him? He's thinking, no, probably not. Will it be some sort of community that embraces him, tells him what his value is, that he's loved and forgiven? Will it be a community? Well, chances are he might find friends that accept him, but chances are they'll also hurt him. He's thinking, no, none of these agencies will actually change that kid. And then that's when he came up with this idea. It is the local church that is the hope of the world. Because the hope would be then that some church in Puerto Rico has members of their church who understand what it was to grow up on the streets, or who would understand how painful life is. And maybe that kid going to a church finds the message of Christ. Someone loves on him. And maybe that guy goes out and then meets this 9-year-old one day, shares the love of Christ, pours into his life, gives him what he needs. And that's when he said, it is the local church that is the hope of the world. We may depend on government to change a nation, but I think when we see history, we see government does play a vital role. You start to realize there has been no government since the beginning of time that's been able to change a heart, to take the darkness and the hatred out of someone. There's been no government. And it's in that sense you start to realize, yes, honor the land, honor the government, but love the church. We're a transient church. It's incredible. In the past year and a half, if we had everybody who stuck around, I feel like we'd be a very healthy, dynamic church, but it's hard. It's honestly hard. This is my challenge to you. If you make this your church here in Korea, don't just come here on Sundays. My challenge is give, invest, love the church. 6 months, a year, 2 years, 10 years, yes, 10 years. Well, however long it would be, my challenge is that. Don't just come and receive. Don't be that mooch, right? But invest, give back. Because this church will only be sustained by the temporary people. Because there have been people who have been with me since early on, but they're tired. And the challenge and encouragement is no matter how long or short your stay is here, to love the church. We're not perfect by any means, but love the church. Help us be a better church. And in that way, may we be the light. Because this is what I want you to also let you know about Korea that you may not know. Korea is a broken nation. You know maybe of its Christian past and how the church boomed. But when you know the stats of Korea, it will break your heart. Let me just share some of the stats. Korea, for the past 11 years in a row, has the highest suicide rate of developed countries. The highest suicide rate. If you know the culture here, if you know what it's like to have that pressure put on you, you start to understand glimpses of why teens will take their life. But not only is it young kids, teens that take their life, in Korea, unfortunately, senior citizens take their life because they're not being honored anymore. So Korea has the highest rate of senior citizens committing suicide of developed countries. It's a dark country. The birth rate is 1.3%, the lowest in the world. I think it's said, about 120 years or so, or 150 years, there will be potentially no more Korea because the birth rate is so low. If you know of other stats of prostitution and trafficking in Korea, it'll break your heart. Stats have said 1 out of every 25 women in this country have sold their body for sex. 1 out of every 25. That's a staggering stat. Women between the ages of 15 and 29, about 1/5 of them has worked in the sex industry. 1/5 of women between the ages of 15 to 29. And then 1/5 of men in their 20s buy sex 4 times a month. I don't share these things to judge. I share these things to say it's a broken nation. those coworkers that you do life with, those people that live next to you, they may seem perfect and happy, but this is simply a glimpse of a broken nation, a hurting nation trying to find God in all the wrong places. And for you to know, what Peter is saying is, if you live honorably, and what you say is what you do, and you seem to actually honor them, respect them, even though you don't understand, you respect them. What Peter is saying is, as you do this, people will come to know God. They will glorify God on that day when He comes back. That's what Peter is saying. He is saying, if you simply have this faith of loving and honoring, what you can do is be the message and voice of God, the love of God to someone who is broken. That's the challenge. And in our minds, we may be thinking, really? Is that really going to work? But there are people here, even within this church, who are of Korean descent or who are visiting even Korea, but they found someone with honorable conduct. For whatever reason, was invited to this church, and in this short year and a half, came to Christ. That's what God does. We don't fully understand it. We may feel like we can't really do it. We feel like our light is not bright enough. But the challenge is, as you do this, you will see faith flow out of this nation. Love the church. Honor the land. Love the church. And lastly, fear God. Who wrote this? It's Peter. If you know of Peter, he's well known for what? Denying Jesus 3 times. Why did he deny Jesus 3 times? He feared a little girl. He feared the opinions of man. Someone asked him, hey, don't you know this man? Don't you know Jesus? No, I don't. I don't know him. Where just shortly before he says, Jesus, I'll give everything to you. I'll commit my life to you. I'll die for you. What changed from this resolved man of living for God so quickly after, several hours later, when a girl, a teenage girl, comes up to him and says, don't you know him? Oh, no. What happened? He stops fearing God. He starts fearing man. As you live in this country, that's the challenge. Don't fear the opinions of the culture and of the people, but to fear God. And it's in that place you will find salvation. You will find peace. But then I want to leave it here. What you will find is that fearing God is not enough. You will find that fearing God does not actually lead to salvation. Fearing God will lead you to some sort of obedience, but it will not bring you to salvation. You see, fearing God is a prerequisite to actually loving God. Once you fear God, that's when His grace is made precious. What do I mean? Let's say, for many of you who drive a car in Korea, it's kind of chaotic here, right? We've gotten into like 7 dingers in Korea. And some of them were with nice cars, some of them, by God's grace, were with very junky cars where we didn't have to pay much. If I'm driving one day and I get into an accident with a Kia Optima, maybe like a few years new, if it's my fault and I ding it, I'll feel bad. But let's say that car driver comes out and says, oh, it's not a big deal. And this one's on me, have a good day. What would happen? I'd be very grateful. But for only a little bit. Because, let's say a month later, I'm driving, I'm thinking about something, or maybe I'm distracted looking at my phone, which I shouldn't be doing. And let's say, as I do that, a Maserati comes in front of me. And I don't pay attention. And I ding it just enough where there's a dent. That guy comes up. And he says, looks at it, he says, you know what? It's on me. What happens? Thank you so much. Because my premiums would shoot up. Right? Because I wouldn't be able to pay for this. I would have to get rid of my car and take public transportation my whole life in Korea. Right? That's what I would be thinking. Why? Because my fear when I hit a Maserati is big. Right? All these fears. But when that guy shows me grace, to the extent that I fear I'm so grateful. If God's grace is cheap to you, the reason it's cheap to you is because there's no fear and reverence for God. He's the living God. But if you have this fear, a healthy fear of Him, that He is God, He is holy, He hates sin, oh, but He loves. If you fear the Lord, and then you see Him be kind, generous, sending His Son, atoning for your sins, that's when grace stops being cheap. Still free, but not cheap. Fear of God will begin your journey of faith. It's the grace of God that will complete it. In your time in Korea, may the fear of God lead you to make the right choices. But when you fail, and you will fail, when you're not a good light, and you won't be a good light, when you explode in anger, and you will do that, may the fear of God lead you to those good choices, but when you fail, may the grace of God complete salvation. When you run to Him and say, Jesus, thank you. God, thank you for what you have done. The fear of God will begin that journey. I hope that you do have a healthy fear of the Lord. But I pray that His grace brings it upon completion. Let's pray.